Unit 4. IELTS Listening, Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about how the aviation industry has affected society and the economy. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 37.
So, what I'm going to look at today is the impact the aviation industry has had on our society and economy. On the 17th of December 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright flew the first aeroplane just 40 meters in North Carolina. In 1908, the first ever passenger was Léon Delagrange, who flew from a meadow just outside Paris. The first actual scheduled air service began in Florida on the 1st of January 1914. By 2014, over 3 billion passengers boarded an aircraft annually. Today, I'd like to look briefly at the history of the aviation industry before going into more detail on its social and economic impacts. Early flights caught people's imagination. However, commercial aviation was very slow to develop. World War I certainly helped to develop the technology, but in the public's mind, flying became associated with war and not foreign travel. In 1933, Boeing developed what was considered to be the first modern passenger aircraft. The Boeing 247 accommodated 10 passengers and cruised at 155 miles per hour. Arguably, the plane that changed the world was the DC-3. It was the first aircraft that actually enabled companies to make money from carrying people. Although planes such as these were significant aviation advances, they could fly no higher than 10,000 feet. The reduced levels of oxygen at higher altitudes made people dizzy and ill. The breakthrough came at Boeing, when in 1940 it released its first plane with a pressurized cabin. Planes could now fly much higher and faster. The growth in plane building grew dramatically in this period as well. When World War II started in 1939, the US had under 300 transport aircraft. By the end of the war, US aircraft manufacturers were producing 50,000 planes a year. At this time, the first jet engine was also built. Isaac Newton was actually the first person to theorize jet propulsion in the 18th century. However, it was not until the 1930s that the British pilot Frank Whittle designed the first jet engine, and not until 1943 that the Americans built the first jet plane. 1969 marked the debut of another revolutionary aircraft, the Boeing 747. It was the first wide-body plane with 2 aisles, an upper deck over the front section, and 4 engines. It was 80% bigger than the largest jet up until that time and could seat 450 passengers. Cheap oil and further improvements in technology have continued to push the growth of the aviation industry.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 38 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 38 to 40.
So how big is the industry, and what impact has it had on our society? Well, if the sector were a country, it would be the 19th largest economy in the world. It supports 56.6 million jobs and over $2 trillion in economic impact. Clearly, aviation is indispensable for tourism. Worldwide, 52% of international travel is by plane. However, it is also key to international trade. Air transport helps countries take part in the global economy. The total value of goods moved by air is 35% of all international trade. On a more local scale, air transport offers a vital lifeline to communities that lack good quality road or rail networks. In many remote communities and small islands, access to essential services such as healthcare is often only possible by air. Aviation's speed and reliability are also vital when people urgently need assistance during emergencies such as natural disaster, famine, and war. Clearly, though, everything about the sector isn't positive. Airline firms produced 689 million tons of carbon dioxide in 2012 and 705 million tons in 2013. While this does not sound like the industry is improving, it does when you consider the increased number of flights. CO2 emissions per kilometre are 70% down since the first jet aircraft in 1943. Airlines currently use traditional derivatives of oil, but they are also looking to develop more environmentally friendly fuels, the key one being biofuels, fuels made from plant-based products. To date, over 1,500 passenger flights have operated partially on sustainable fuels. By moving to alternative fuels, the amount of CO2 released could be 80% lower per kilometre compared with traditional jet fuel. Now, let's look at the...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. In the real exam, you now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.